And what about Cuba, which after almost 70 years of a supposed childish revolution that only interested the Castro family, left a population plunged into absolute misery? And this week they had to announce a change in the economic model. They are experiencing their own perestroika. And probably before the middle of the year, with the leadership of this great man, Donald Trump, maybe we will see a free Cuba. In each of these cases, we can see that making these terrible decisions, which sacrificed freedom on the altar of supposed efficiency, was guided by political utility. And planning gives endless resources to the communist in power to do whatever he wants. And all these mistakes or evils happened because they stopped thinking above all about the moral order, or rather they did this by obeying their own distorted sense of moral order. That's why we call communists those who want to follow the same path in Western countries which manage to accumulate wealth by doing exactly the opposite. And this also applies to the well-mannered ones, the well-mannered socialists, who surround themselves with good people and who deep down implement policies that exterminate nations. Because although they always deny the successive failed experiments and try to distance themselves by calling themselves socialists or social democrats, they share the same principles. For all these reasons, as I have already explained, we took the opposite path even though everyone said it was impossible. In our first month in office, we made the biggest adjustment to public spending in human history to deal with our debt payments, and in this way, to start restoring the credibility of our country, more or less, just so you have an idea of the scale. We reduced public spending in real terms by 30%, that is an adjustment of 5 percentage points of GDP. They said it was impossible to do over the course of a term, and we did it in a month. Because in a giant state that exploits its citizens, the right thing to do is, above all, to reduce the size of the state, even though everyone said it was impossible. In 6 months of our term, we eliminated all sources of money creation to stop deceiving Argentinians with señorage and thus restore confidence in our country and the currency, a fundamental condition for economic growth. Specifically, this refers to the quasi-fiscal deficit. That is, the deficit of the central bank, which was around 10 points of GDP. And we managed to solve this in 6 months. All this means that in a period of 6 months, our current government made an adjustment of 15 percentage points of GDP. In other words, we gave back almost $90 billion directly to all the Argentine people. Even though everyone said it was impossible, we began to gradually open up our economy so that our truly competitive sectors could compete globally and thrive, and so that Argentines could have access to high-quality products at the best price. And we won't rest until we become the freest and most open nation in the world. As a result of adopting these measures, thanks to our moral filter, we managed to reduce poverty from 57% to 30%. That is, we lifted more than 15 million Argentinians out of poverty, which obviously means taking millions of Argentinians out of poverty. We also managed to reduce the country risk from about 3,000 basis points to around 600 points. And we started to attract approximately $100 billion in investment to our country. Here in Europe, by contrast, the opposite decision-making framework has prevailed for decades, just like it was in Argentina, although at a different pace. First, they analyze what is convenient for the politician or the bureaucrat, then what is economically efficient, and lastly, they analyze what is morally correct. If they even do that at all, and they do not always do it, disguised as virtue in the name of compassion, they attacked property in the name of equality, destroyed merit in the name of empty universalism, and handed over the sovereignty of their nations to bureaucrats that no one elected. Every time European politics made a bad decision, it did so under the banner of a noble cause. And that's the trick, that's the trap, because behind every noble cause there's a very concrete political equation. Creating dependence is creating voters. Each subsidy is a bought vote, each regulation is a favor called in, each open border is an expanded voter registry. They don't do this out of compassion, they do it because it benefits them, and they drape it in a humanitarian banner so that no one dares to question them. Let's take, for example, economic policy and immigration policy. As we all know, Europe prides itself on being a nanny state. That is, taking proportionally from those who generate the most wealth, violating property rights and equality before the law, in the process to redistribute it to the rest of society in the form of services. In other words, they consider the economy to be like a pie. They are focused on managing and deciding which slice each person gets instead of focusing on making the pie bigger. This leads to the economic stagnation that has already been observed for some time in a region. And the farther those at the top are from the individual, the worse the consequences of this attempt at planning. National subjection to the unilateral dictates of supranational organizations replaces sovereignty and individual freedoms with the whims of the bureaucrats in charge. When power is separated from the responsibility that comes with representation, it can quickly turn into tyranny. In fact, during the speech delivered just a little while ago, my esteemed and dear friend Santiago Abascal made a point of mentioning the little tyrant in the making that, unfortunately, you have here in Spain. Bye-bye. If we add to that the issue of migration, which only serves to indiscriminately increase the number of people receiving pieces of the pie, with no requirement for any kind of contribution, the population that has paid taxes for so many years ends up being deceived, as they are given back a system that is heading toward collapse. As a result of this action, Europe was left without growth, without the rule of law, and today it is clear that its leaders have also lost all political credibility. And by that I mean something that seems obvious but that politics obscures. Ideas are not abstract, ideas have real and profound consequences in people's everyday lives. When a society chooses the path of freedom, things get better for everyone. We're seeing that in Argentina. When a society chooses socialism, things get worse. We saw that in the Soviet Union, we see it in Cuba, we see it in Venezuela, and we saw it ourselves during 100 years of progressive decline in Argentina. It's not a matter of luck, it's not a matter of natural resources, it's not a matter of history or geography, it's a matter of decisions. Nations that embrace freedom, private property, and the moral order of Western civilization progress, while those that abandon it always decline without any exception. That's why what's at stake in every election is not just who governs, but the direction in which a people are heading, and that direction matters. That's why Prime Minister Orban and the Hungarian people understand this very clearly. Being a country that experienced the misfortunes of communism firsthand, today they confront it with the same spirit I'm describing. They have placed their trust, determination, and courage in Prime Minister Orban to carry this forward, and truly, he is someone worthy of admiration for the enormous work he does. Thus, Hungary has become a country that chooses to do what is right instead of what is well regarded. This relentless stance led them to stand firm on migration policy, going against the entire region that was pressuring them to open their borders. On the other hand, Europe chose to do what made politicians look good in the headlines of newspapers around the world. Today it faces a disproportionate crisis in this area and in so many others. In this sense, I feel that I have something important in common with my friend Victor. We both started fighting these battles long before it became popular to do so. When I said in Argentina that socialism was destroying us, I was a pariah. They didn't invite me to the shows, no party called me, journalists looked at me as if I were crazy, and even so, I kept saying it because it was the right thing to do. Victor, at the same time, was the first to stand up before Europe's self-righteous elite and say what no one wanted to hear: that the West was in danger, that Europe was committing suicide, that mass and uncontrolled immigration was not an act of generosity, but rather an act of irresponsibility toward its own people. He said this when it was still costly to say so. That's called courage. Today, years later, the facts have proven right those who spoke the truth at the right time. And that's exactly what distinguishes a statesman from a politician. The statesman speaks the truth before it's convenient to do so. That's why my message to all of you tonight is this: when evil and evildoers impose themselves as the norm, it is our duty to defend ethics, morality, justice, and truth with more courage than ever. No matter how hard they try, no matter how much they invest in the media, no matter how many laws they impose, we must not let ourselves be convinced that wrong is right. Wrong is wrong, even if millions of people defend it. In this sense, I would like to add a very famous phrase from the epic novel Aeneid by Virgil, which was often repeated by the economist Ludwig von Mises. First, I will say it in Latin, which I will obviously pronounce terribly wrong, but I will try. And then he boldly says, "Tu ne sede malis sed contra audenturito," which means never yield to evil, but fight against it with even more strength. And Victor is certainly succeeding, thank you. Today we are facing a reconfiguration of the world order, and the way we position ourselves in this new world that is emerging will determine the fate of our nations. The era of global cooperation without a moral compass has come to an end. Too many institutions that were created to mediate conflicts and ensure peace have been taken over by bureaucrats who have turned them into instruments to impose an ideological agenda on people. What should have been an impartial referee has become an actor with its own agenda, and the result is plain to see. Times of change require an accurate diagnosis, a calibrated moral compass, and the courage to act. In this world, more and more the lines will increasingly be drawn between free nations and subjugated nations. Hungary and Argentina are two nations that understand this very well and are embracing the winds of change. That's why we support initiatives like the border PIF from the President of the United States, J. Trump. When countries that share fundamental principles and common values act with firm resolve and strategic coordination, real and significant progress is achieved without being trapped by inertia or political ambiguity, which often paralyzes the functioning of certain international organizations and global forums. Argentina joined from the very first day because we believe in a diplomacy that takes risks to achieve peace in our country. This path is already beginning to bring concrete results. Macroeconomic order, unrestricted respect for private property, the defense of life, and the restoration of clear rules have brought back predictability, investment, and growth. This process does not go unnoticed in the region or in the world. More and more countries are looking at this experience as a reference and are beginning to follow a similar path. To give an example, now Argentina is in a position to guarantee Europe's energy security. We are experiencing a gold rush in energy investments. Imagine that by 2030, we will be exporting more than $30 billion a year. Europe is urgently seeking. Europe has sought energy independence for years. We offer something better, a reliable partner with huge reserves and a government that honors its contracts. Thus, Argentina once again takes a leading role, not by imposition, but by example and by what it has to offer the world. Argentina is driving a broader movement that seeks to restore America's greatness on the basis of freedom, and that movement already has a name on our continent. It is the decision to make America great again. It is the conviction that only on the basis of freedom, order, and respect for the values that gave rise to our civilization is it possible to build a future of prosperity. And that same conviction is the one that is now beginning to gain ground in Europe. Europe does not need to reinvent itself. It needs to rediscover itself, return to its roots, and regain confidence in its own history, and leave behind the logic of permanent guilt. On this path, Hungary occupies a central place, and Viktor Orban has become one of the clearest and bravest voices in the task of giving Europe back its direction. Now, Hungary is approaching a new turning point, with two opposing moral models competing to lead the country in the coming years. That communism, which once appeared under the Soviet flag, now presents itself in another form. It hides behind multiple noble and humanitarian causes, all seemingly independent but closely linked by a common agenda, waging war on tradition and hatred for everything we consider good, beautiful, and sacred. Within a few weeks, the Hungarian people will have its say again. Today, more than ever, we must be clear about what is really at stake. What Hungary decides will resonate throughout Europe, because when a nation stands firm in the face of political correctness pressures, it shows other countries that it is also possible to resist and win. When a nation decides to defend freedom and its families, its borders, and its traditions, it reminds other countries numbed by the engineers of decadence that there is still time to react. And when a leader like Viktor Orban fights this battle without asking for permission, he becomes a beacon for all of us who do not accept that the fate of the West is a managed decline. Dear friend Viktor, you have our respect, our admiration, and our support. Hungary has in you a leader of exceptional courage and once again indispensable for the future of Europe. And all of us who are fighting this battle in the name of freedom, we know that when a statesman stands firm in defending his people, he not only protects his nation, but also restores hope to the world. That's why, thank you all very much. May God bless Hungary, may God bless Argentina, may the forces of heaven be with us, and long live freedom, damn it. Thank you all very much.